Initial Thoughts is a spoiler-free movie review series. All opinions are my own. Hi everyone, welcome back to Initial Thoughts, a series in which we talk about films as and when they're released. Today's film we're talking about is Uncharted, which is directed by Ruben Fleischer, I hope I've said that right, and stars Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. So before I delve into talking about Uncharted the film, I thought I would talk about the Uncharted game series itself on the PlayStation, a series in which, obviously this isn't a game channel, but I thought it would be remiss of me to not start by talking about my experience with Uncharted, the game series. Uncharted 1, 2, 3 and 4 are four of the best story-driven, but also engaging games to play. And when it comes to gaming itself, it's something I do quite a lot, and Uncharted is definitely one of the best examples of a game that I've truly loved. Especially, I would say, the second and fourth in the series were two games that I truly love. I'd go as far as say they're near enough 10 out of 10 games. The story throughout them, the action scenes, the shootouts, the character moments. For games, they're absolutely fantastic, and the writing and the passion and the love that goes into the character of Nathan Drake and Sully, for that matter, through the games really does hit home. Even from the first game when it was released in, was it like 2007, something like 2008 maybe. You know, it's a long running series by this point. And I know we've not had an entry in the game series since the fourth game that came out when the PS4 was pretty early in its run. So it's been a little while, but my love for these films, and I have such, I wouldn't even say it's rose-tinted glasses when it comes to talking about the Uncharted game series, because they just are quality, and I know most people I've talked to that have played them are in a very similar boat to myself. They just adore these films, they adore these characters. There's a real connection, especially as even after the first game, there was a real connection that the player has with Nathan Drake. So there was a real, when I heard that there was getting a film adaptation, which all games do, I would play quite a lot of games and quite a lot of story games, and if we're being honest, guys, the gaming side of movies, you know, the film adaptations for video games have not had the best batting average, let's say, and that's putting it very mildly. We've had some absolute stinkers. We've had some pretty surprisingly decent, and I think that's what it is now. The hope for these is more of a surprise of, oh, actually that was pretty good quality, not just a tie-in for tie-in's sake, a film adaptation for adaptation's sake and for money's sake. And that's what a lot of these sometimes fall into the category of. Something like the Assassin's Creed film was a good example, because the early Assassin's Creed games were also really good, especially the first and second. And although I have to say I didn't completely delve into that series as much as I did with Uncharted, especially with all four games, but I found that the Assassin's Creed tie-in with Michael Fassbender was just a shell of what Assassin's Creed was, and the love and the care, a bit like what I was saying here for Uncharted. So when it come to this film, I thought to myself, are we getting an Assassin's Creed situation? Are we getting a Cradle of Life Angelina Jolie? The first Angelina Tomb Raider is okay, but the second one, not so much. But basically, we're hoping for a surprise when it comes to Uncharted. So let's talk about Uncharted. And as mentioned there, I don't think I actually came in with this with very low expectations. I hoped this would be good, this Uncharted film. I really hoped it would be good. And I was quite pleasantly surprised, I have to say. Not to the point where I thought this was a masterpiece by any means, or a film that I would ever rush to go and see again, I have to be honest. But I thoroughly found myself enjoying this Uncharted film. Maybe thoroughly is a bit of a stretch. It was good. And I think maybe that is because my expectation was so low that when it came to seeing this film, I was like, okay, actually I'm in. You have me quite hooked. And, you know, the story was surprisingly good. It was quite a faithful adaptation of an Uncharted story. a bit like something like National Treasure. One of those kind of world-hopping treasure hunts, if you like. That was what this film was, and it did, for what it was. The story was surprisingly great. It was the beats. It was never boring. There was always something going on. There was a lot of action pieces. There was a lot of good character moments as well. I found the characters throughout had great chemistry for a lot of moments, but then some not so good. It was peaks and troughs, to be honest with you, because we had some great interactions with characters, and then some others that was just, nah. It was very hit or miss with that. But when they were good, they were good. And another thing was, in a film like this, as I say, with it being world and kind of globe-trotting, is that the word? Yeah. Globe-trotting adventures, when you're going all these luxurious or very, coastal regions and wide open seas and islands and things. You want it to be a beautiful film, and it actually is a very lovely looking film. Some of the scenery is stunning throughout this, so the cinematography was definitely something I would get a thumbs up for me on. And yeah, as far as video game movies go, as I mentioned, and this is definitely in the upper bracket. Not to the point where it's a great film on its own. I think it's weird. It's not a great film. It's a good treasure hunt film, but when you tie it to Uncharted, it bumps it up because you think, oh, well, it's a video game, it's going to be awful, and then it turns out being pretty good. So it's weird in how I hope that makes sense, because it kind of makes sense in my head, even I'm getting a bit confused by it. But I think it's just, you go in expecting really, really mediocre, and it wasn't that at all. But that's the good. Now I'm going to get on to the bad, because it's not without fault. And the biggest fault, you might already know what I'm going to say, because if you know me and you've been following these series and my videos and things, I usually start with actors. I usually start with performances. I usually start with characters, and then I talk about all the stuff I've already mentioned after. Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg are not Nathan Drake or Sully. It's just not them. It's not Tom Holland. Tom Holland is a fantastic Peter Parker. His outing in No Way Home recently, it's on the channel. If you get a chance to watch that, I mean, you've heard my love. If you've been following the channel, you've heard my love for him as Peter Parker. He's, for me, the definitive live-action Peter Parker. He's fantastic. But he's not Nathan Drake. Nathan Drake is a 35-year-old, in my head, and I know a lot of people are in a similar boat, the game character. That's not Tom Holland. And that's not me knocking Tom Holland's ability. Tom Holland, it's not his fault. He got cast in this. It wasn't his decision to go, okay, well, I'll go and make a lot of money and I'll be in this. And for what he does, for what he's given, he's pretty good, to be honest with you. But he is not, to me, and I know this is maybe me being a bit, I don't know, preachy or a bit pernickety with things like this. I can't ever see Tom Holland. I've said already, I 100% see Tom Holland as a Peter Parker. But he is not Nathan Drake, and especially with them being so close to each other. Peter Parker, absolutely, 10 out of 10 casting. Him as Nathan Drake in Uncharted, it's an absolute no-go for me, guys, I have to say. And when I say that about Tom Holland as Nathan Drake, oh my god, Mark Wahlberg as Sully. Mark Wahlberg as Victor Sullivan might be one of the worst castings I've ever seen. And do you know what? Right. This is where it sounds like I'm going to go off on a rant on how awful Mark Wahlberg is. Mark Wahlberg is... I think I've mentioned this recently in one of my other videos. Mark Wahlberg is the kind of guy who has a great performance 1 in 10. And when when it's really good, it's really good. He's actually not too bad for what he's given in this film. His chemistry between him and Tom Holland works surprisingly well on screen. But both of those people, Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg, are just not Nathan Drake and Victor Sullivan. They just aren't. And I know we're basing it on games and you can't find exactly that right person, but I'm telling you, you could have found someone better for both of them. Not for acting performances, because what they're given, the roles they're in, they're fine. They're serviceable. I didn't think they give bad performances by any means. Simply on surface level, Tom Holland is not Nathan Drake, Mark Wahlberg is not Victor Sullivan. And that's why this film doesn't fully work for me. And it's weird because you've heard me praising it already, and I liked a lot of the stuff. I really did. I liked a lot of the story beats. I loved the chemistry between the characters, including Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. Like with them two being the two leads, let's say that way, they're good together. I'm not totally against Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg being in another treasure hunting adventure film. But when you make it Uncharted, it's just not them. It's not them. And that's not their fault. They went for the film. They got cast in it. I wonder what the decision was in that casting room, I have to say. It's not them. And I know maybe you might say, right, well, who would you put as these two characters instead? I'm sure you could easily find someone that could have done a better Victor Sullivan. Someone that's slightly a bit older, bit wiser. Because it's not that they're just younger versions of these characters. It just doesn't feel to me that it's them. And that's where I don't really want to go on and on about this, guys. You get what I mean. And I'm sure a lot of you, if you've played the games and love the games, you probably echo what I'm saying. If you don't, and you like these guys, and you thought they were right for them, fair enough. Just wasn't for me. And that's why that'll play into my rating that we're getting up to in a second here. But the casting just wasn't right. Aside from that, Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg, for what they're given, the role they're in, for them being them, weren't too bad. I thought Tom Holland was pretty good as Nathan Drake. And that sounds like I'm completely going against exactly what I've been complaining about. Tom Holland acting the role to play the treasure hunter as the main focus did pretty well. Him being Nathan Drake, the same one that's in the games, absolutely not. Mark Wahlberg as kind of the older mentor kind of character to Tom Holland's treasure hunter, not bad. Mark Wahlberg as Victor Sullivan from the games, absolutely not. And that's where I'm at with this. So I don't want to keep lingering, and because that's just not going to change, and that's just my thoughts on it. As far as the film itself goes, I quite enjoyed it. Not a great film, not a masterpiece by any means, but definitely one of the better video game movies that we've seen. So anyway, let's get to a rating time. As you can see, IMDb's gave it 7 out of 10. I'm going to give it a very loose. I debated maybe giving it a 6.5, but I don't want to get too hung up on just those castings, because the film is what it is. The film itself, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. On another day, if it was more agitated about the Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg castings, maybe a 6.5. But you take all that away with a good story here, a good, quite epic action adventure, globe-trotting. There was a lot to love in here, and I would imagine a lot of the general movie-going audience that haven't played the games and go and see this film would quite enjoy it. And I hope they do, and I would encourage you to go and see it yourself. I didn't think I'd be truthfully, I thought I'd be starting this video ready to absolutely hate on this film, and aside from the casting, as you can see, I've quite enjoyed it. It's just something it's me in my brain and just deciding I don't like that, so I don't like that. That's not the case. I'm trying to be more objective and not just hung up on the one thing that is the casting. The story itself, the film itself, is pretty good for a video game movie. I would recommend you give it a chance, and I'm gonna, as I say, I've given it 7 out of 10. And yeah, that's Uncharted. I don't know. It was a weird one, as you can tell, guys. I was kind of caught up in my own head. Was I so hung up on the casting to give it a bad score? And I didn't think that was fair. So that's why I've decided to give it 7 out of 10. I would implore you, if you get a chance, to give it a go yourself. Whether you've played the games or not, I would be interested to hear your views. And if you do like listening to me and you want to hear more about my thoughts on these films going forward, that subscribe button is there. I would appreciate you so much if you hit it. I appreciate you anyway for taking the time out of your day to listen to me talking about the films. As the series goes on, as the year goes on, more films coming out as we go, and there will definitely be initial thoughts for the bigger releases of the year, along with everything else that's going on the channel. And yeah, thanks so much, guys. Please leave a like to let me know that you enjoyed the video. I don't even know what I'm saying here. It's got me all discombobulated. I feel like I've got too hung up on that casting thing. I haven't really. It's not for me, but the film is. There we go. That's the final line. The casting isn't for me. The film is for me. There we go. Does that make sense? I'll let you be the judge. It's getting into waffle territory. I don't want to start waffling. I appreciate you so much, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye, guys. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Before you go, here are some of my other videos. For updates and information on upcoming videos, the best place to find us is my Twitter. Much love, everyone.